This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Hello and welcome back to the Monday Morning Break with me, Kanto Kutik. I hope you're having a good Monday if you've just started your day, or have had a good one if you're coming to the end of your day.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
As an EFL teacher, I recall that during my teacher training days, we were taught a lot about communication in the classroom. For instance, we learned about the importance of balancing out teacher talk. Things like don't talk too much, let your learners talk, give them time to speak, give them opportunities to speak. So, giving our learners more speaking time. Think cooperative learning, communicative language teaching, role plays, group work. We learned about the importance too of grading our language and avoiding meta language, and the use of English only in the classroom. So initially, I struggled with that, and I've heard the same from fellow teachers. They didn't know what to do when their students switched to their first languages in group activities. They struggled having to give explanations in English only, especially when the students L1 seemed more, especially when using the students L1 seemed more intuitive and efficient. In the show today, we're going to look at translanguaging. Have you heard of that? Well, it's a term that originated within the field of EAL, English as an Additional Language. Put simply, it is the use of the learner's own language in the classroom where they're learning English. Now, this is not the same as code switching, which is a separate linguistic construction. Okay, a learner who uses their first language in their English lessons does so for a number of reasons, and not all of them negative. If you're an English teacher and you've had the situation with your learners, what do you do? What do you do? How do you encourage your students if they're speaking, if they've reverted to their L1, when you've put them into groups, when you've given them pair work, and you say, your worksheets in English, what do you do when, as soon as you've left them to work on their own, they immediately switch to their first language, to their home language? How do you feel when they do that? Do you get annoyed? Do they try to hide it from you when you do that? Think about it. My guest today, I can see that you are there. Thank you very much. My guest, I need you to click on the call in button, please. Can you please find the call in button and click on that so that I can get you into the show? I see that already. Well, basically, in the show today, we're not going to enter into a deep discussion, okay, about of our learners with you, to consider the reasons together why our learners revert so freely to using their home language, their first language, And we want to discuss at the end of it why, L1 use, why translanguaging can be beneficial, in fact, to our students. Um, so my guest is here, Huang Wen. Welcome. Let's just test your sound, make sure you're here, and say hello.
Hello, everyone. I hope that is clear enough for me.
Yes. Oh, it's
Thank you
absolutely
very much.
clear. Um, Huang, can you please tell us first, just to begin, tell our audience, tell our listeners who you are, where you are, what you teach, who you teach. Over to
Ah,
you.
yeah, right. Thank you very much. And I would like to say hello, all of you. And I'm from Vietnam, Hanoi, Vietnam. My name is Hoàng, and I'm very honored to be here. Very pleasure for me to be here. And thank you for having me here, the host. Right. My full name is Nguyễn Hữu Hoàng, and I'm an English teacher. I have been working as an English teacher for more than 12 years and university in Hanoi, and its name is the Academy of Journalism and Communication. And I also visiting teachers, English visiting teacher and some other university in Hanoi. And my students are a diverse and dynamic group, primarily comprising university undergraduate age between 18 and 22, as well as postgraduate students who are over 23 years old. So actually, this range of ages and experiences brings a unique richness to my classroom interactions, and some things I find incredibly rewarding. And I mostly teach GE, general English programs, which encompass four fundamental skills like English listening skills, speaking, writing, and reading skills. And I also take care of some English major students, and my focus shifts to more specialized areas such as speaking skill and translation. Yeah, and these students often have a higher level of proficiency and are looking to refine their skills to professional or academic purposes. Yeah, over to you, the host.
Yes, thank you very, very much. Thank you, Huang. That's lovely. So you teach just like me. You teach English language to students whose first language isn't English. Well, obviously, it's English as a foreign language. We teach university age students. Um, your and my students have a high level of proficiency. Um, you teach GE. I think you also do some specialized courses, as do I. And my question, we chatted yesterday a little, Huang, and I was sharing with you that I find that my students, even though they have a good level of English, they tend to, when they're working on their own, when I've given them some work, they tend to revert to
Mm,
using their first language,
mm,
amongst each other. s- Um, amongst each other. Do you have that as
yeah,
well? Do you have that same experience?
yeah, me too. I have the same experience as you. Um, all the time, actually, nearly all the times when I give them some kinds of assignments or some mini tasks to do at the class. So they often turned to Vietnamese. They use Vietnamese to chat to each other, or even some students, when I observed, they use
Hmm.
Vietnamese. They use Vietnamese to write their main ideas on the draft, and then they translate into English. Yeah.
Why do you think they do that? I always wonder why my students do that.
Yeah, actually, when I asked them why don't you use English to write or to speak to each other, they
Hmm.
said that I felt more, confident, more convenient to interact each other, and they want to save time.
Yeah,
They want
you
to
know,
save
oh,
time to transfer their ideas to each other. Yeah.
yes, Huang, I have the same. I have the same with my students when, exactly the same experience as you. We've done a particular topic, let's say a
Mm-hmm.
particular, exercise, and then
Yeah.
I say to them, here's your worksheet. Now I want you to look at this. I want you to work in groups to
Mm.
solve this problem.
mm,
And they get together, and then I hear na 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 in the background,
mm,
and I walk around,
mm,
and they're speaking in German. And
mm,
I do the same. I ask them, and um, they say roughly the same thing as your learners. They tell me it's easier. My
mm,
students say it's
yeah.
easier and it's faster.
Mm,
It's like they want to complete the task quickly,
mm,
and they find that it's just simply faster to to complete the activity, to complete the task in their
mm,
first language.
mm.
Are you disappointed when you hear answers like that?
No, not really, because when I did mini research about translanguaging to compare between the students from their normal schools
Mm-hmm.
and the students from their like foreign schools. I mean,
Yes.
they use English all the time, mono language,
Right.
and you know, an interesting yeah an interesting findings that in Vietnam, I don't know whether in Germany, but you have the same or not. But in Vietnam, normally their high school teachers or secondary or primary school teachers, when they teach English, they often follow grammar translation approach.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the students they have a long times a long time of you know learning English in that approach. So it's a kind of habit. Whenever
Okay.
they think something, whenever they speak something, whenever they write something, they think in Vietnamese first,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and
Mm-hmm.
they translate into English. And when they have the questions from the other one in English,
Yeah.
they try to translate into Vietnamese first. They think the answer in Vietnamese, and then they translate their answer into English, and then they
Mm-hmm.
answer it or they write their answer, yeah, in
Okay.
English letters.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm,
Okay. That's really interesting. I've been reading a lot as well about translanguaging, and like you say, I mean, I think it's a very interesting phenomenon, and what I discovered first when I began reading about translanguaging is
mm,
that it's actually a concept that came up in within the field of English as an additional language. That means
yeah.
in English speaking countries like in the US or Australia or the UK, and like what you say, so this would be different
Mm,
from the monolingual classroom, like
mm,
high school classrooms in Vietnam or in Germany, or even high school classrooms anywhere else where English is taught as a foreign language. So we
mm,
have that one difference. And the other difference is that so these English language classes in English speaking countries usually, well, in addition to the students being from multilingual and
mm,
multicultural, the teachers don't speak. Very often the teachers don't speak the students L1,
mm,
right?
yeah.
It is very much the same in Germany, Huang, where at certain levels in school they do still follow the grammar translation method. Maybe not so strictly, but there's things like vocabulary learning. When it comes to vocabulary learning, I know that it's quite common here in schools where the kids, high school kids, get list of words in English and their German translations, and they have to learn those words, and then they get tested. And when they get tested, the words are often tested like maybe in a sentence or just individual words. Here's the German word, give us the English word.
Yeah.
Um, so it's not in context. And then when in certain levels also, teachers will do items of classroom management
Yeah.
in German as well. So it's not really English only,
Mm,
is it? So students, I suppose they're used to it, and
yeah.
they expect it, and I suppose students also find that it's just more efficient to
Mm,
get things done,
yeah.
isn't it? Um,
Yeah.
has your experience then been with students if you oh no, sorry, let me put the question differently. Have you tried to push your students to English only in the classroom when they're working independently?
So many times. Actually, is the rule. I always set the rules in my class that English major class only,
Mm-hmm.
that you have to speak English all the time, not only to me but also to your peers.
Mm-hmm.
All the time you have to do that. Even when you're taking note, when you're taking note, you should do it in English. So when I set the rules, they
Mm-hmm.
have to follow. They have to follow. Yeah, this first one is the rules of my class. But I suddenly discover an interesting fact that um, whenever I join my class, they likely forced they are forced to
Mm-hmm.
speak English.
Right.
However, however, when a native speaker teacher they enter my class, we also have the foreign teachers. When
Mm-hmm.
they enter my class, they are willing, they are very happy to speak in English with them very freely. They
Ah.
chat with them all the time, and they express like not only the language, but also a kind of body language or gesture. They act as the native speakers. I don't know whether they are mimic or they it is a kind of habit, but it's quite different from my classes. Sometimes I really disappointed and some unhappy about that. I'm really sad that why they are unwillingly communicate in English in my classes. Mm, but
But they would
they
do it to the
yeah
other teacher. They would do it to the native
yeah
speaker. That's
yeah
very interesting. That is very,
yeah
very interesting. So um, that's actually quite counterintuitive. It's
yeah
actually quite counterintuitive, don't you think? Because if you think that they're using, excuse me, excuse me, if you think, right, if we imagine this scenario, okay, you've got a class, you're the teacher,
yeah
you share the same first language as them, and you've given them group work, and straight
yeah
away
yeah mm,
they work in, they use their first language to
yeah
negotiate meaning to complete the
yeah
task. And you would think that if they had to speak to anybody in English, they'd be
yeah
confident
yeah
speaking to you, right? They'd be
yeah
confident. And generally, I mean, for me as a non-native speaker of German, I'm not very confident speaking to native
yeah
speakers of German. I always think, oh no, my German isn't that good. So our logic, our reasoning would dictate that your students would be more shy, would be less confident about speaking to the native speaker
yeah
in English, and yet they've done the exact opposite.
yeah yeah very they communicate in English with the native speakers very fluently, very confidently. However, I don't know why.
Hmm.
I don't know why in my class they like a kind of um unwillingly do that, and sometimes they get stressed maybe about my rules
Uh-huh.
about the rules. I don't know why, but I try to make it more comfortable to have learning environment, but uh, just some kinds of difference, and I'm trying to find the answer for that.
Do you think that maybe with the native speaker, they there's a sense of wanting to show off,
Yeah, right.
like,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
that's
we
it.
can do this. Whereas with you,
Sure.
maybe because you're their, how would you say, their main teacher, you're their
Yeah,
original teacher,
yeah,
there's
yeah.
that fear of judgment.
Sure. Yeah, that's it. Mm. I'm thinking about that. Okay. The teacher. Okay. So Huang will also find the mistakes, find the errors in speaking, in grammar,
Mm,
something like that. But for the native speakers, they never pay attention to that. They just focus on the meaning and
on the
they
meaning.
communicate to each other. Yeah, right. So maybe it's a reason.
Oh, yeah, you should try and observe that. Um, yeah, that's really really interesting. We're gonna take a break now, and when we come back from the break, Huang, I think I'd like to talk with you about some strategies whereby we can kind of get and encourage our students to use to kind of help them see, when is it appropriate and okay to use the first language, and when would it be better to just really, really try to work with the second language. But we're going to have to
Sure.
take a break right now. We'll be right back in 5 minutes. Stay on the line.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishing professional development books and resources to support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Have you checked out their latest releases? Use the code JCTTR2324 for 20% off your order. Don't miss out. Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading.
Introducing Eton X from Eton College, a diverse range of quality online courses enabling young people to aspire and excel. Designed for self-study, these web-based courses empower your students with essential leadership, communication, and academic skills for success at school and beyond. Our Study Skills course sharpens their learning abilities, while the AI Fundamentals course equips them with vital digital know-how in a fast-changing world. Other popular courses include verbal communication, critical thinking, writing skills, resilience, creative problem solving, and many more. Offer the Eton X curriculum in your school for free. Visit etonx.com to find out more.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
Ofsted finds itself in the news again as inspections paused for a 2-week period to allow inspectors to undertake mental health awareness training begin again on the 22nd of January. ITV News shared the results of a survey of almost 2,000 school leaders, which showed that 97% support the removal of single-word judgments. The survey, carried out by NAHT Union, followed the outcome of the inquest into the death of Ruth Perry. The union has urged Ofsted to implement a number of changes, including a mechanism for school leaders to halt an inspection where an inspector's conduct falls below standards, extending the notice period schools receive for inspection, and asking them to revert to a process, however temporarily, of ungraded inspections similar to those conducted during the pandemic. Meanwhile, the BBC reports that Ofsted has apologised fully for the first time for the role it played in Ruth Perry's death. The apology came at the same time as Ofsted responded to the coroner's Prevention of Future Deaths notice. In the PFD response, new Ofsted chief Sir Martin Oliver said, "Such tragedies should never happen again," and that he apologised sincerely for the part inspection played in her death. Since the death of Mrs Perry, schools judged as inadequate on safeguarding alone are now re-inspected within 3 months. Ofsted also changed its confidentiality rules to allow heads to speak to colleagues, family, friends and health professionals about outcomes of inspections before the report is actually published. The Department for Education has committed to working with Ofsted to review things during a consultation in the spring, which it is calling the Big Listen. Education unions praised Ofsted's positive steps, but said they were only the beginning. The weather has been front and centre of the news this week, with schools across parts of Wales and Scotland being forced to close due to snow. Icy conditions and weather warnings made for tricky travel and forced school closures in areas badly affected. For those concerned that the post-pandemic impact of remote learning would mean the end of snow days, pictures on social media and local news proved that this was not always the case. But anyone worried that the icy blasts will last can be assured that the weather is set to return to normal over the next few days. Authors, including Sir Michael Morpurgo and Mallory Blackman, have written an open letter urging the government to invest in early years reading. The According to a book trust survey, only half of children between 1 and 2 from low income families are read to daily, with some families struggling to access books and being in need of support. The letter from authors is addressed to both Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer and says it is not right that children from poorer backgrounds are deprived of a life rich in reading. Sir Michael Mapogo is president of the Charity Book Trust and helped launch their new campaign, Get Reading, to support disadvantaged children in family reading. He spoke on BBC Radio 4's Today programme, saying that the younger that children are introduced to the power of stories, the better chance there is of putting them on an extraordinary pathway of knowledge, understanding and empathy. He also said that books need to be free at the point of delivery, like the health service. A DFE spokesperson said, "We are committed to raising literacy for children," but Sir Michael said that these efforts are clearly not enough. Finally, The Guardian features an article which looks at research in America that appears to show that children learn better on paper than on screens. The research follows headlines across the pond which focused on the nationwide collapse in reading scores among American youths, citing a 4-point drop in the comprehension skills of 13-year-olds, falling below skill levels of 1971 for the worst performing students. Politicians appear to be assigning blame to the pandemic and the subsequent lockdowns, with remote learning being labelled as bad for students by the Biden administration. Others blame teachers who they say lobbied for lockdowns. However, the article itself focuses on a new study by neuroscientists at Columbia University's Teachers College, which appears to show there is a clear advantage to reading a text on paper rather than on a screen, because it leads to what they describe as deeper reading. A sample of 59 children aged 10 to 12 were asked to complete a series of tasks, which led researchers to conclude that we should not yet throw away printed books and shouldn't rely on the digital revolution just yet. Further details can be read on the Guardian website. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Joe Fox.
Okay, and so we're back, and now it's me and Huang. We've been talking about translanguaging in the classroom. We've been talking about how our students tend to revert to their first language. In Huang's case, Vietnamese. Huang is a teacher in Vietnam, and in my case, to German. When we've done our bit of teaching input and given our students some work, and when they're working in their groups, they discuss their discussions are in their first language. They take notes in their first language. And what I'd like to look at now is to come up with maybe some situations, Huang, where we think L1 use in the language classroom is seen as a strength, and where we could actually accept it.
Yeah. Actually, in my English classes, there's different levels of students. They have their different frequencies of using L1 in EFL classes. For some GE classes, general
Yeah.
English classes, they use English. Sorry, they use Vietnamese more often.
Okay.
They like exchange their ideas or asking some questions even to the teachers or their friends, classmates.
Mm-hmm.
They like they think, basically they think about the answer normally. They think about the answers in Vietnamese and they write in Vietnamese and they translate into English. I think it's okay because
Mm.
they try to focus on the corrections of the grammar. Yeah,
Yeah.
they try to avoid the spelling mistake or grammatical mistakes. They want
Yeah.
to perfect their sentence or their answer.
Mm. It's
And
a
yeah,
strength. Sorry to interrupt, Huang,
yeah,
but it's a strength, isn't it? When you think about it, for them, to be
Yeah.
able to have that thought process, right? So they've been given some input in English, or they've got a question, and they want to ask the teacher. It's a strength to actually have that question, or to have those ideas in their L1, and to be able to, express those ideas, to ask that question in English. It is actually a strength, being able
Ac-
to use two languages. It's
mm,
translation.
Actually, it is. I think it is strength because for the first time, they want to bridge the gap between the teacher and the students in the class. Normally, we have
Mm-hmm.
the gap between teachers and students, and they are afraid, they are fear of asking questions to the teachers. So
Right.
when they feel more comfortable and when they feel open to the teachers and they share, they are not afraid of making mistakes. So day by day, step by step, they will ask the questions in English. However, for the first time, they normally ask the questions in Vietnamese. um, I think it is a good way at first to
Mm-hmm.
narrow the gap between the teachers and the students. Yeah, it's just about the way they think. But I
Mm.
think the first time it is good for them. But when they feel more comfortable with the teachers, they will, use English more. They use English more to make the questions or answering the questions. Yeah,
I like what you said there about
the
feeling
feeling.
more comfortable,
Yeah,
with the teacher. I think especially if you've got a new class, you've got a new group of
yeah,
students, even if, sometimes we think, even, oh, we know the student, that's
yeah,
all fine. But especially, it is a dynamic, isn't it? It's the
yeah,
student and you, it's the student and their classmates, and um people, I think, no matter what age, whether they're in grade school or at university or even adult learners, we don't like it when we know we're putting our effort, into learning a
yeah,
new language, and then somebody
yeah,
laughs at us.
yeah, yeah,
It's very, very embarrassing, no matter what culture you're in. And I think, as a teacher also, you generally, if you've got those years of experience, you can also generally tell if a student is trying to find an easy way out by using, their first language, or if they're testing the waters. I've had, for example, I have a student that I've known, for now, at this point, for a year. And um, we had a class online last week, and he wanted to answer a question, so I called on him. And then in the online classroom, he turned on his sound, and then he said in German, "Can you all hear me?" And I said to him, I said, "Yes, we can hear you, but you can say that in German, and then in English." And then we all laughed, and he knew, and he was very
yeah,
apologetic. He said, "Oh, yeah, 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 yeah," you know. And then I had a similar situation where I was working with a group of 11-year-olds in a secondary school, and one of the kids came up, and it was a craft activity, and the student needed glue and stickers, and came up to me and asked for that equipment in German. And I said to her in English, and because I've been listening to the classroom, and I know roughly what they can say. So I then said to her, I said, "Oh, well, you can say that in English, can't you?" As an encouragement. And then she admitted, she said, "Oh, but I'm not sure how to say it." And then I pushed her a little, and I said, "Why don't you try?" And so she said, she tried it one word at a time. It was very slow,
yeah,
but because it was just me and her, she was then, comfortable and confident. And then when other kids came up to ask for glue and stickers,
mm,
and I said the same thing to them, that they could say it in English, they were more confident because they saw how I had dealt with her, how I had encouraged their classmate. So I think as a teacher, we can generally tell if a student is testing, if a student is unsure, and even for me as an adult learner, of German, when I go to certain meetings that I have at work that are run in German, I always have those, things I want to say in my head in English, and I
Yeah,
try and work out how do I say this in German. Yeah.
yeah, but do you think that for adult learners, the situation will change, the things will change a little bit, at more difficult for them than
I think they're more
younger?
conscious. I
Mm,
think. I think I don't know. I'll tell you what I think, and then you tell me if you think the same. I find that adult learners, they are more self-conscious about making mistakes
mm,
because they feel that maybe the teacher feels that they should know this because maybe they had learned this in school. Whereas I find that my younger learners, the ones, especially the ones who are still in school, um, they have they're not shy to tell me, well, I don't know how to say that. And
mm,
and the kids will say that to me. They will say in German, I don't know how to say that. And then I'll help them to say it. But my adult learners, they're very afraid of making mistakes
mm,
because they think that I will judge them.
yeah,
In the university classroom, they're afraid that their classmates will judge them. They're afraid of being laughed at. What are your thoughts? What has your experience been?
yeah. Yeah, I have the same situation, but when I compare between the university students, I mean the undergraduate and the
Mhm.
postgraduate students. So the undergraduate students, they normally are very shy if they try to speak something in English.
Mhm.
Yeah, but for the postgraduate students, they're very confident. Actually, even they know that, even they know that they will make some mistakes, and even they um, pronounce something wrong or something
Mhm.
incorrectly, but they are very confident to speak something out, and
Right.
they have the belief that the teacher will be there to have them to correct, to have them to run in a good way. So they always confident, and even their pronunciation is not quite as good as their undergraduate students, but they are more confident than the
Mm.
undergraduate students. Yeah. So
Mm.
they
Uh,
not, yeah, and they try to avoid using Vietnamese in the EFL classes.
mhm.
However, for the undergraduate students, they try to use as much as possible, use Vietnamese as much as possible.
Mm. I
Yeah,
think, I mean, maybe it has to do with what you've said earlier, isn't it? It's
yeah,
their own language learning experience in school
yeah,
because you go from school to university, and
yeah.
that first stage, you're the undergraduate.
Okay.
Oops, some tech issues there. Um, so you go from school to university, you're an undergraduate, you're very much, influenced, you're very much molded by the learning experiences that you've had in
Yeah,
school. So if in school it's been, a lot of grammar translation, if in school your teacher has done a lot of explanations in the L1, if your teacher's always done, classroom management stuff in Vietnamese, or in my case, German, then you come to university and suddenly, and I suppose in the case of your students, suddenly they have a teacher
yeah.
who's Vietnamese like them, but then this teacher does everything in
Mm,
in English, from taking attendance right down to setting homework, giving explanations, does everything in English. They find that really unusual, and they've got to, their head has got to kind of come to terms with that. Whereas with the postgraduate students, because they've been
Yeah,
at
yeah,
universities for a couple
sure.
of years.
Yeah, that's it. So in this case, so I try to avoid making them I mean the undergraduate shocked.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I avoid using English all the time for
Yeah.
non-English major student. But however, for English major students, I have to use English all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm. I mean, you probably don't get that question, but excuse me, you don't get this question. I get it quite often. I get it from the school kids that I work with, and I get it from my first semester students, the ones who come fresh out of secondary school into university.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
always ask me, do you speak German?
That's
And
true.
I always say, no. I mean, it's a total lie, yeah. But
Yeah.
I go, no. Because the thing is, I find that as soon as they
Oh.
know that I speak
Oh.
German,
Oh.
then they don't they just don't put in the effort anymore
Oh.
to speak English. They're not pushed anymore. I have found that for the students who believe
Mm.
that I don't speak German, like when they come to me and they have to, excuse themselves for something, or they need to leave early. I see them standing in front of me, and they go, um, excuse me, miss, but like, today I have to leave early. So they're able to say that. They say, I have to leave early because I have, and then I can see the thought process through their eyes where they're thinking, how do I say this word? This, I know this only in German. How do I say it in English?
Oh.
And
Oh.
but it really, really pushes them. And I
Mm.
just stand there and I'm
Mm.
patiently,
Wow.
looking at them and waiting for them. And
Mm.
then, maybe 2 semesters down the road,
Mm.
they discover that I do speak German, and then they're just so shocked, like, and I look at them and I wink and I go, look, that's your secret and
Mm.
my secret. Just don't tell anybody,
Mm.
but they're um in your case, I suppose you don't have it because
Mm.
your students know, right,
Mm.
that you speak Vietnamese.
Mm.
So that was very interesting. We were talking a little bit about classroom management things, and you say you do that in Vietnamese. Do you do that the same for, all classes, all levels? I know probably not for the postgraduate, but in your undergraduate?
Yeah, I do that, and I really do that for all the my classes. However, there's one idea come up to my mind that the educational policy. So
Mm-hmm.
in Vietnam is their top down approach.
Right.
So when I was novice teacher,
Mm-hmm.
I was reported I was reported to the um, fan QT.
Oh
Yeah,
no. What
yeah,
did you do?
because I used English all the time. I didn't use Vietnamese. I
Okay.
tried to explain at that time. In the classroom, I tried
Mm-hmm.
to explain everything in English. Even they didn't understand, so I tried to stop there and explain the thing I said before in
Mm-hmm.
English until they understand what I mean. However, they said that it's quite tired. They quite tired to. It mean at that time they took a long time to
Mm-hmm.
understand what I mean in English because
Yeah.
they have at that time they had to brainstorm a lot.
Right.
So it could cause them tiredness, and
Okay.
they
It
report it to the
Oh
fan
no.
QT.
So
So
they were not happy with that teaching method.
sure, yeah,
They felt that it took them longer to understand. They felt that
sure.
it took them longer to make any kind of progress.
Yeah, right. So I was advised to use Vietnamese more to explain some abstract concepts.
Mhm.
And yeah, I was very happy to receive any kinds of comments or advice because it's very valuable for my teaching process. However,
Yeah.
yeah, however, sometimes I felt uncomfortable with this kinds of policy because I didn't have any kinds of management, yeah, myself management to my class. So I don't
Okay.
know whether in your country you have this thing. No, maybe no, right?
No, I mean, it we we have a curriculum.
Yeah.
I mean, you could have a student. I mean, I can imagine, right? I can imagine it is not unheard of, right?
Mhm.
Let's say if I had a class, I teach one exam class that's it's not a general English class, it's a grammar class.
Ah, yeah.
And I can imagine for me, let's say, worst case scenario. So I teach in English only. I do my classroom management in English only.
Mm.
And um, let's say, okay, so I'll give you a bit of context about this class. So students take an exam at the end of this class, and it's a very important exam. And they have 3 tries. That means if they
Ah,
fail this exam
yeah, yeah,
3 times, they
yeah,
cannot continue studying on
yeah.
this particular program. Okay, so let's say I have a student who takes this class, and this student struggles because, let's say, according to the student, they've not understood me, they've not understood my explanations, they've not understood
Yeah.
my input. I work with a textbook that's English only, they've not understood the textbook. They might go after the third try, they
Uh-huh.
might go and appeal to the
Mm.
faculty
Oh.
and say, I was disadvantaged
Mm.
because my teacher only spoke English and did not provide any input in German. They
Yeah,
might do that.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
It is a possibility.
yeah.
Um, I don't know what the faculty would say, but the faculty, I know that the faculty would not come back to me and say, you have to teach in German. They would not say that, because what we have actually is we have module handbooks. So for our degree program, each course we call it a module, and each module has a description.
Yeah.
And in the module description, it actually states
Mm.
what the language of instruction is. So it actually does
Oh,
say,
very clear. Yeah.
yeah, very clearly that the language of instruction in this course is in English. So
Mm.
I suppose a student could go along and complain and say that they were disadvantaged. But then the faculty would say, but hang on a minute. In the module handbook, it does say that the language of instruction is in English. So sorry, you have no grounds for
Yeah.
appeal.
Yeah.
Um, and I suppose in your case it is quite um it's quite challenging for you as a teacher if on the one hand you're convinced about the value of your pedagogy, and
Yeah.
you have reasons for teaching the way you do,
Yeah.
especially in the foreign language classroom, isn't it? I mean, if
Yeah.
you were teaching math
Yeah.
and you thought, okay, well, I'll do a bit of math and I'll teach it in English, but your students aren't going to understand it,
Yeah.
even though they're English and math majors. So you focus in on teaching math in Vietnamese. That's
Yeah.
absolutely fine, but
Yeah.
you're teaching them English. You're teaching them to go out into the world to use English and to understand English, and I think a language classroom um, isn't as effective if at some point you're using more of the learner's home language
Yeah.
than the foreign language.
Mhm. Yeah. Actually, I did understand that, and all the faculty members did understand that. But for the reality, for the practical method, they normally use Vietnamese to explain,
Mm,
to save time, save effort, or something like that. And actually, for the rules, actually the rules is not quite strict
Mm,
and not quite clear as yours. So um, they have some ways to complain. Yeah, and
mm,
actually, in Vietnam, the class is normally the multi-level students.
right.
It is not clearly stated like your um, elementary um, or advanced, something like that. No,
Mm.
just mixed class. So it's
Oh,
quite difficult for me or the other teachers to use all the English all the times or use Vietnamese less than English or use Vietnamese more than English. So it's quite difficult or quite challenging for us to adjust. Yeah,
yeah.
actually.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, that's the difficulty as well. That's the difficulty with a multi-level class as well, because you don't want, on the one hand, you don't want the lower level students to feel that they've been disadvantaged because they can't understand you,
Yeah,
and they feel that half the lesson has gone past them. And
yeah,
on the other hand, you don't want the more fluent, the more competent students to think that the class is useless because they don't get a chance to speak you
yeah,
know
right.
in
That's it.
in English. You've actually led very nicely into what I wanted to finish with, and that's the teacher use of the first language in the classroom. Uh, I use German in my classrooms rarely, but I do use it when, for example, making very important administrative announcements.
Mm.
So my students, for example, they have exam periods, or yeah, basically it's I only use it for exam periods, or when I'm announcing, really important matters pertaining to things like registration for their
Uh,
thesis, or
yeah,
announcements like that, because I find that if I don't do it in their first language, and then they might come along and say, well, you didn't say it, like they don't
yeah,
hear
yeah,
it,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
right? So I do that then, and also I have some words that are in German, that administrative words, official words, that I just can't translate,
Yeah,
and I find it very silly to say, have a sentence in English and then throw in that German word. So I just say the whole thing,
yeah.
in German. Another time that I do use German in the classroom is um, when I get angry with them. Um, Sometimes when I think about it, it does sound a bit funny, but I find that they don't take me seriously
Mm,
when I show them that I'm disappointed, or I'm a little bit cross with them. When I do that in English, they don't take me seriously,
mm.
because they understand the words, but they don't understand the implication.
Yeah.
They don't understand the intended meanings. Whereas my students have learned that if I say something in German,
Yeah.
then I am truly, disappointed with them.
Mm.
Yeah. So that's from my part. What about for you? In what
The
other
same.
aspects do you find using
The same.
L1? It's the
Yeah.
same, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
just the impact is different.
The same now. The same now. When I want my students to understand fully what I want them, so I have to speak in Vietnamese, like the
Mm,
route or the assignment or the instruction, something like that. And
yeah.
I would like to make sure that they will go in the correct way.
Mm,
The second one, when I use Vietnamese in my EFL classes, that I want to show my angriness. I'm
yeah.
disappointed with them, and I'm disappointed with them, and I'm very angry at that time.
Hmm.
So they may some of them may guess what I mean, but some some they just think, oh, I'm explaining something.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think socially, when you use the same language, you're actually, you're actually showing, come on, we're in this together. I think when you're using the same language, you're showing that you're in this together. Whereas if, you're expressing your disappointment in English and they're, in my case, German L1, or in your case, Vietnamese L1, that there's still that gap. There's still that hierarchical gap that,
Yeah.
you're a teacher and we're the student. Whereas if you do it in the same language, you're kind of showing, I feel that I'm showing, look, I'm in this same room with you, I'm in this same pot with you, and
Exactly.
what you just did was not on. We've got to summarize soon. Our hour, it has passed so quickly, it's coming to an end, but I just have a short message from our sponsors and then we'll summarize.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishing professional development books and resources to support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Have you checked out their latest releases? Use the code JCTTR2324 for 20% off your order. Don't miss out. Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading.
Introducing Eton X from Eton College, a diverse range of quality online courses enabling young people to aspire and excel. Designed for self-study, these web-based courses empower your students with essential leadership, communication, and academic skills for success at school and beyond. Our Study Skills course sharpens their learning abilities, while the AI Fundamentals course equips them with vital digital know-how in a fast-changing world. Other popular courses include verbal communication, critical thinking, writing skills, resilience, creative problem solving, and many more. Offer the Eton X curriculum in your school for free. Visit etonx.com to find out more.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
This week in the news, the Joseph Rowntree Foundation published their report, Poverty 2024. Among many of its startling conclusions was that 1 in 5 people, that's 22% of the UK population, were in poverty. In 2021 to 22, that's 14.4 million people. 8.1 million were working age adults. 2.1 million were pensioners, and 4.2 million were children aged between 3 and 10. And overall, this represented the longest period of increased poverty in over 20 years. These figures also show that 6 million people were in what the Rowntree Foundation describes as very deep poverty. This week, widely reported, was the government's plan to ban disposable vapes. The Guardian carried a story earlier in the week of a head teacher who revealed that a vape detector he had installed in school bathrooms went off more than 100 times on the first day. He also recalled his horror when a student passed out after sharing a vape with someone else before school. Speaking to head teachers up and down the country, I don't think there's one school where young children are not addicted to vapes, he is quoted as saying. The Times Educational Supplement on the 24th of January carried a story that would hardly surprise many teachers. With the headline that just 4 in 10 teachers found their last inset day useful, 41% of classroom teachers questioned in a survey described their last inset day as either somewhat useful or very useful, while a third said it was not particularly useful, according to figures published by Teachers Tab. The findings were based on 9,000 teachers across England, surveyed during the autumn of 2023, and are part of a report highlighting shortcomings in current teacher professional development. However, almost a fifth of teachers, 17%, said they would prefer to receive £2,500 worth of CPD vouchers over, or rather instead of, a £1,000 pay rise. The conclusion being that teachers value professional development if they have more control over its delivery. According to The Guardian this week, London councils are preparing to mothball schools to avoid a boom or bust cycle of closures. This is primarily caused by a falling birth rate, higher housing costs, and the aftermath of Brexit, which saw an exodus of young families from the London area. This week in the House of Commons, Gillian Keegan, the Education Secretary, was accused of filibustering by the Speaker Lindsay Hoyle, who admonished her for her lengthy, time-wasting answers to questions over exams and crumbling schools. The Speaker said, "We're having this problem every time, and it's topical questions. They're meant to be short and punchy." And finally, this week saw the conclusion of the BET Education Technology Conference in London at the Excel Centre. Among the many exhibitors you will have found, if you'd gone there, the Teachers Talk Radio exhibit, with Tom Rogers and other Teachers Talk Radio presenters conducting interviews, recording videos which you can find on YouTube, and generally creating awareness of the work of Teachers Talk Radio. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with John Gibbs.
Well, I've been here for the last hour with my guest, Huang Wen. We have been talking about translanguaging in the classroom. We've shared how, we've shared our experiences, our very similar experiences about our students using their first language when we leave them alone to do group work, pair work, work on their own. We've discussed that actually, there are situations where L1 use is actually seen as a strength because it shows that our students are processing the information that they've received. They're processing also what they want to say to us first in their first language, and then expressing themselves in the new language. We've also seen that sometimes teacher use of the L1 is efficient, is important so that misunderstandings don't occur. And we see that L1 use, we've agreed that L1 use isn't actually something that's detrimental. And as a teacher, we need to see where we can support our learners, and if helping them, through their lessons with their first language as a tool can only do all of us a world of good. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Remember, you can listen back to previous episodes on ttradio.org. Later today, Ray Whitehouse will be talking about classroom and whole school inclusion on the Late Late Show. And tomorrow, Emily Edwards will talk about assemblies. Thank you everyone for being with us today. Thank you, Huang. It has been a pleasure.
Thank you very much for me to be here and having me here. Have a nice day.
Have a nice evening to you too.
World. Have you checked out their latest releases? Use the code JCTTR2324 for 20% off your order. Don't miss out. Visit johncatbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.